Hey Guildies, Fletch here. I have a challenge for you. Do what I do. In this series, a Jinn member will pick up some task from the Do What I Do board and perform the steps necessary to complete that task in a realistic enterprise environment. After that, we'll open up the task to the community so that they can do the same exact task but in a different language or style. Let's get started. All right, so let's get on with it. Let's see what we're working on here. User story number 1001, episode 1. View fruits on a homepage. Now this Do What I Do system will eventually have a user system, so a user can add their own fruits, maybe track their own calories, do all kinds of things. But we're going to start from the beginning. So story 1, just be able to view some fruits on a homepage. So as a site visitor, I want the ability to view fruits with their calories so that I can use the site to make healthy choices. Now, this is a user story created by a business admin or a product owner or whatever the case is, and it follows the as a I want so that. We've got some given when then here. Given that I can access the website, when I visit the homepage, I want to see a table of fruits and their calories per serving. And given that I can view the fruit table, when I select an option to sort the table by calories or name, then the order of details changes based on calories or name, respectively, obviously. I mean, seemingly obviously. Part of what I want to do here is if there's developer questions, then and you are given access to change this, I want you to be able to come in here and put your own comments on here or questions and say, hey, maybe we can enhance this a little bit. There's some additional details here. There's some special non-user story, just do what I do side details. I'm going to skip over the UI UX stuff. If you are a UX master and I know nothing about UX, but if you say something like there's different languages, for example. I mean, there's obviously a lot of different programming languages, but if there's like other than different tools to use, which isn't exactly the same thing as different programming languages, but if there's some way to make UX have a do what I do, then let me know and I'll include more of these types of things and we can do a do what I do for UI UX stuff. But I'm going to move on to the first development task here, which is UI development. And this task says essentially the same thing as the acceptance criteria, but it's inside of a task that's attached to the user story. Implement a dynamic table, dynamic being the keyword here, that can list any number of fruits. There should be a column with the name of the fruit and a column with how many calories there are per serving. Each of these two columns should be sortable with a three-way sort, ascending, descending, and whatever the default was from the data source. Of course, you can pick up any task you want in any order you want, but I'm going to go ahead and pick up this task as my first task. We'll get into the API stuff in the next episode of Do What I Do. So let's move this over here and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to say new folder, Do What I Do, Fruit UI. Okay, let me make sure my chat is visible on my other screen over here, just in case you guys are chatting with me at any time and have any questions. And feel free to ask questions, and I'll do my best to try to catch that you ask them. Okay, so let's open up this folder. And as I do with any new repository, and I'm sorry, the trash man is going by. I have a really good microphone, so it might pick it up. Okay, as I do with any new repository, I just go ahead and open up this and say git init. All you have to do is type git init. If you didn't know that, you have to, of course, install git on your system. But you type git init and you now have a repository. So in this repository, I'm going to say new text document, index.html, just like you'd see as the main page for any website. All right, Notepad++. I will be using Notepad++ instead of Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio because this is a super simple project and I'm trying to demonstrate simplicity here. I'm not trying to say this is how you do stuff in Visual Studio. I'm not saying this is how you do stuff with React or Angular. This is just a super basic HTML JQuery website. So HTML and HTML. I'm going to say body and body. All right, so like I said, the first thing I'm going to do is a dynamic table. Let me pull that over here. Just sort of keep it over here. It's going to be behind the scenes, but I'm going to keep it over there. So I'm going to make a dynamic table. Before I make it dynamic, I'm just going to make a table. So I'm going to have a table row on the top with some headers. TH and TH, TH, and TH. I'm going to make the first one name, just like the task asks for, and the second one calories. Okay, so name and calories. I'm going to do the same thing, but for table data, I'm going to have kind of orange, as I have no idea, 15, nope, I don't have numlock on. 15 calories, let's say apples have 10 calories, kiwis have 5 calories. I have absolutely no idea. All right, so I've got a little page here. Let's go ahead and open it up. There we go. It's got no styling or anything. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in on it. And it's got no styling or anything, but we've got our first little set here. So following best practices, I'm gonna go ahead and check something in. Get, add, all, and commit with a message of initial. Okay. Get, add, all, and get. Oh, I didn't put get in the first one. Okay. Get commit initial. Cool. I don't usually just type that out every single time because I actually have my own little alias that I use that does the same thing. I usually use add-commit and just sort of demonstrating how I got to this point. So you can actually add your own alias. I added mine called add-commit. So from now on I can say get add-commit with a message of whatever. Okay, so I've got that committed. I've got my first bit of code here. I'm going to add a little bit of styling because this just looks a little bit gross. I'm not focusing on design, but I'm going to try to at least make it functional, practical, obviously. So I'm going to start with some style. It's going to be up here in the head. Put some style in here. I'm going to make the TDs and THs, which are essentially the same thing. I'm going to make them have border 1 pixel solid black and a little bit of padding. Something like that. Save it. Refresh. Oh, it's so beautiful. Look how beautiful this is. Don't hire me to design anything that you ever do. All right, so I've got a table. This is essentially almost the only thing that's going to go in this file, other than a couple more little things in the head. And this is sort of like principle number one, I would say, for doing this style of development, is that this is an HTML file. This is not a JavaScript file. It's not a CSS file. I could move this into its own CSS. I'm not going to right now because it's so simple. But this is the perfect place for a designer who knows HTML and CSS to come in and do some work without having to worry about all of the JavaScript and everything like that. So, sort of principle number one. Styling, cool. All right, so I've got some styling in here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just sort of planning how to make this dynamic. I think to make this dynamic, what I'm going to do is have this as the template, and I'm going to say key value. I'm just going to say take this row and sort of repeat it over and over again so that it essentially looks like this, except it's going to be dynamic. So in order to do that, I'm going to need some scripting that's going to use JQuery. It's going to use the DOM. It's going to find this TR. It's going to find the first TD, because we don't want the first TR that has THs in it. It's going to find the first TD. It's going to get the parent, which is the TR row. And then it'll copy that into memory and delete it. And then from then on, dynamically, it'll fill it in with whatever dynamic data that it wants to fill it in with. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Script. What you want to do is you want to, of course, wait for the DOM to finish loading before you do any sort of DOM manipulation. So I'm going to say document.ready If you don't remember this, I know a lot of people who are using Angular and React and everything, they don't have to do all this stuff because it sort of handles a lot of it for them. But once the document's ready, I'm going to tell it that I want to do something. That stuff that I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put in a different file. So the best practice to be doing with JavaScript and jQuery and web development is to have your JS stuff in a different file. So I'm going to say new. There we go. Let's just call it fruitcontroller.js. Okay, so the idea of naming it fruitcontroller.js is that a controller, in the controller is where I'm going to put all the stuff that deals with the DOM, messing around with the DOM. It's not a backend service that's going to be doing calls to an API or anything like that. It's just the stuff that's going to be messing with the DOM. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and in here I'm going to be doing something called an if pattern. That is immediately invoked function evaluation. I don't really remember right now. Var fruit controller expression. Iffy expression equals. Let me see here. Fix this. Fix this. Bam. Don't want to be just developing in the blind completely over here. Okay. Of course, we're going to want this. We're going to say function, and we can do any dependency injection we want right there. And after we start the function, we're going to immediately invoke it by pretty much calling the function with the open close parentheses right here. Okay, so what did I say I was going to do? I said that I was going to grab over here. I'm going to grab this first TR. So let's go ahead and make a function here that says, let's say, var init equals function. And on initialization, I'm going to say var tr html equals. Okay, in order for me to grab things off the DOM, I'm going to need an ID on this table. So let's go ahead and come over here and say ID equals my table. It sounds great to me. My table. I guess I can name something different. Fruits. Fruit table. I don't think it's a good to have the HTML name inside of ID. It's just call it fruits. Just call it fruits. Sounds good. All right, so we have. So in order for me to get that DOM object, I'm going to use, of course, jQuery. And I'm going to say, using the selector for the ID, which is a hashtag, fruits.find. I said we're going to find the first TD that's inside there and grab the parent and grab the outer HTML of the parent, which is the TR. We actually need to prop outer HTML and say alert tr HTML just to make sure that we're getting it right. All right, so this is an internal function that's private. Nothing else can get to this unless we expose it. So what I'm going to do is return an object that has initialize on it and come over here. Now we, of course, need to include this inside of our HTML. So I'm going to say, first of all, include jQuery because we're going to need to be using jQuery. This is the jQuery I just found on the jQuery website. So for Google APIs, jQuery, you can Google around, find that right there. But I also need to include my own script type. I don't know if I need type. Source equals. And that was called fruitcontroller.js. So I include fruitcontroller.js, and now what I'm going to do inside this document.ready, since this is immediately invoked, and so now the moment this is loaded, that function is called. So I should have a fruit controller here. I'm going to say fruitcontroller.initialize. All right, let's see how many errors I got. No errors. Oh, I did get an error. Initialize is not a function. Initialize is init. That is correct. And init is right here. That is correct. And document.ready. Init it. Because spelling is important. There it is. Look at that. Okay, so on initialization, of course I probably typed too fast for my own good. It calls the initialize. It grabs that tr.html from that very first row. It has the key and the value variables inside there. And then it just alerts it for now. I don't always just want to alert it, obviously, but that's one thing I can do. So like I said, a controller should be doing stuff related to the DOM. I'm going to go ahead and in here say, I'm going to take a dependency on a service, a more back-end service that deals with the lower level JavaScript stuff, maybe making HTTP calls. I'm not going to make HTTP calls right now, but I'm going to go ahead and do some dependency injection. I want service, and I'm going to go ahead and explicitly dependency inject jQuery, even though you don't technically have to, but I like to be explicit. So I'm going to inject a fruit service, and if it's null or undefined, I'm going to go ahead and have it default, and then jQuery. So this will do automatically dependency injection of itself, so I don't have to rely on someone higher up doing something like that. This service is going to be doing the lower level stuff, like messing around with the session and the and logical stuff that's unrelated to the DOM. This is DOM related stuff inside this controller. So let's go ahead and use the whole copy paste method, fruit service.js. I'm going to say open with Notepad++, fruit service. Service is not going to need yet another layer of services. It's just going to need jQuery inside of it probably. But it will only need jQuery in order to do jQuery type functional things, Lambda type things, functional style jQuery stuff. It won't need jQuery to access the DOM because you should not be accessing the DOM once you get as far back as a service. So it will have its own init method, initialize, yes, and I will also need to include that here. And because of the way that we're doing this, we will need to include it before fruit controller, so that it can, so that it is initialized and we have a fruit service before fruit controller is instantiated. So let's open this back up and say, all right, loads fine. That's perfect. Let me see here. I think at this point, I'm going to have to add another style later, but at this point, this file is pretty much done. I'm going to leave it open though, sitting there for a little while. So inside this service, like I said, I'm going to be doing a lot of the closer to JavaScript, lower level stuff. And one of those things that I'm going to be doing is some session storage stuff. So I'm going to include in here set object and get object, which is just sort of a shortcut of session storage. It's a much shorter way instead of having to call session storage.set item. And also, since session storage to store things as JSON, this takes care of the stringify whenever you're inserting an object and the parse whenever you're retrieving it back out. So I've got those in there. I'm going to go ahead and expose those as functions that can be used by this service. So set object is set object, and get object is get object. Okay, so those are methods that I can use now. And let's jump back over here to our controller. I'm going to say service.setObject. I'm going to name it tr.html, and I'm going to set tr.html. I'm just going to not make it a variable itself and just put it right in like that. So now we're setting in session storage a thing called tr.html, and we're applying the value of that initial HTML that we're pulling out for this first row. Perfect. Okay. When we initialize the controller also, I want Usually this is where I'd call the API. I would say let's make a call into the services, HTTP, get things from data, whatever. But we don't currently have HTTP stuff set up, and we're not going to. We're just going to mock this out. But we'll call the mocked out method call fruit API. So that'll be the first thing that we do, and we'll go ahead and make a method in here called var call fruit API equals function. Okay, and inside here we're going to, I guess, just mock out some data. I'm going to copy paste this from my side sample code. So we're going to call the data fruits inside of whenever we set this object in session storage. We'll call it fruits, and we got banana, apple, and kiwi in here. And we are initializing, calling the API. This will set it inside session storage. And when we call init, it's doing that. So let's go ahead and come over here, make sure that we're not doing anything. Nope, messed up something. Call fruit API is not a function. I probably mistyped. Oh, okay, that's what it is. I need to expose it through the API, through the as a publicly accessible object. Make sure it's spelled the same there. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, so we've called the API. We've got the data in memory. We've got that TR in memory. After we get that TR in memory, I said that we're going to have to delete this out of the DOM so that we can then come back and populate it for each one of those objects that are inside the fruit API for banana, apple, and kiwi. So let me see here. So what I'm going to do then is inside the controller, once I have the stuff set up, I'm going to say fill table, and I'm going to fill it with the data service.get up. I'll make a different function. Let's just start by making this function first. So I don't get too far ahead of myself. Var fill table. This is altering the DOM, so it's going to be here inside the controller. Equals function like this. And fill table is going to, first of all, grab that table, which was called fruits. And it's going to remove that, it's going to remove the TR that has a TD in it. It'll remove all TRs that have a TD in it. So remove all TRs that have TD in it. So fill table, there it goes. Make sure there's no errors popping up. Looks pretty good. All right. Add service and store data. There we go. Make a commit. You want to make a commit as often as you can. All right, so I've got that, and it removed that. Now we just need to sort of repopulate it back on for each of those items that are inside of the fruits. So I'm going to get the fruits from the service. I could call get object, but I'm going to go ahead and make another method instead called var get fruits equals function. All right, there we go. And I'm going to say, I'm just going to go ahead and say this. Look at that, copy paste, I'm amazing. Okay, so I have to expose this, get fruits. All right, so now I have get fruits. So I don't have to call get object fruits and have to know the name of what it stored, because it stored it here, it named it here. I don't have to expose what that's called over here. So I can just say equals service.get fruits. There we go, perfect. All right, everything seems to be working, no errors. And so the next thing I'm going to do is for each one of those, well, since I'm going to do an each, I'm just going to use it one time. I'm just going to go ahead and put it inside the each. So jQuery.each for each thing inside of the get fruits data. I'm going to run a function. There's an index and there's some data, but I don't really care about the index, so I'm going to throw that away. And I'm going to say this function will fill in the my table stuff. So it's going to be jQuery selector for hashtag the fruits table. I'm going to append the HR, a copy of the HR, the TR, a copy of the TR for each of those things. But I don't have the TR here. So let's say I'm going to get object. Since I set the object down here as TR-HTML, I'm going to say get that object from the service, which is just stored inside session data. I'm going to append that TR. Well, let's just go ahead and do that for now and see how it looks. All right, well, there are 3 objects inside of our fruit, our return from our fake API here, and there's 3 here, but we haven't replaced these. This is functional stuff to replace this. It's no longer messing with the DOM, so I'm going to go ahead and take this TR-HTML. I'm going to call a method inside of the service. I'll call it format TR, and I'll pass in this HTML that I pulled from the DOM, as well as my X from this function. This function is providing this X for each one of those things. Go ahead and do that. I think I put a semicolon there. So I need a method called format_tr inside here. It's going to do some functional stuff. It's going to return. It's going to take in TR-HTML and that X data, and it's going to return TR-HTML, replace. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the key, and then off of that I'm going to replace the value. So format HTML, and we just go ahead and skip over the formalities. All right, so format TR, it's going to take that TR-HTML that comes in, it's going to replace the key with object.key, and it's going to replace the value with object.value, because these objects have one property called key and one property called value, so it'll be able to use that off of those objects. So that's another thing I've got going on here now. Format TR. Refresh. This looks like it's probably okay. Nope, I messed something up. Was it that semicolon? Format TR is not a function. Okay. Service.formatTR is not a function. Oh, because I put a capital F like a genius. Yeah. First try. All right, we've got a dynamic table. It doesn't have any sorting right now. This is just coming in. This is smaller. This is the biggest. This is the middle one. It's just coming in mixed up. So this is straight from the. This is coming in straight from the data, just like this. All right, dynamic table. Okay, this is our service code, a bunch of functional stuff. This is our messing with the DOM. I don't know that we need to mess with the DOM any more than this very much, but I think we're gonna have to do a little bit more work there. But now we need to definitely sort the data. In order to do that, we're going to have to track. Well, first we're going to have to put a little sort thing on here. So we do have to do something back over here inside this HTML. That's fun. Span. Let's just say sort. Let's just say I have a thing that says sort. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Look at that. It's freaking beautiful. I don't like how clicking on this, first of all, doesn't have a pointer, but also selects. And so I've decided to put a little bit more styling in here. I'm going to name this ID of sort by value. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say sort by value and sort by name. Let's go ahead and stick sort by name inside of here right now. I'm going to say these have a cursor for pointer, and they're going to be blue, and user select none. That means you can't highlight it. So I can click it now. It won't highlight, but it looks like it's a little button. I can click sort. Of course, it's not doing anything, but I can click sort, so that's pretty good. And at that point, this is actually, I shouldn't have to do anything else here. There's styling, there's HTML, a designer / HTML person could come in here, and I could say this TR is used just so that they can see this is used as the template, so don't change it recklessly. And they can focus on DOM stuff. Just messing around with HTML. They could put menus in here. They could put a hero or icon or branding and coloring. They can do whatever they want as long as they're not messing with this little bit right here, and they have the context of what's going on. And I'm pretty much done with the index. I'm just gonna close this out. Look at that. Now I can just focus on software engineering. So now whenever I fill the table, let me think about how I want to do this. Okay, so I need to make these clickable, I guess is the first thing I'm going to do. So to make these clickable, I don't like using onClick inside of the HTML because you're mixing up stuff that your JavaScript is doing with stuff that your DOM and your styles are doing. So inside of the controller, when the controller starts up, I'm going to grab those objects from the DOM, and you saw that it gave them the name. This one was named sort by name, and this other one was named sort by value. So I'm going to say, using JQuery, I'm going to grab the sort by name. I'm going to say on click. I'm going to call a function that does something, and what it's going to do is fill table with sorted data. So how I sort it is going to be a whole different story, but value will do the same thing. Fill sorted data. To get sorted data, I'm actually going to have to sort the data, which is a very functional thing. So it's going to be like service.sort data, something like this. Okay, so let's go into the service and make sure that we have a sort data. So we've added the click function so that when someone clicks on this object, it will call something called fill table. So var fill table equals function alert fill me. Yes, high five. Bad habit. Okay, so fill table, I need to make sure that I expose this. It's fresh. Click sort. Service.sort data is not a function. I know what I'm doing. Sort data. Bam, fill me. Look at that, first try. All right, we've got fill me going on in here. I'm going to say add initial add sort clickability not yet implemented. There we go. Look at that. Perfect. Okay, so we've got that commit going on. Let me see here. Yeah, I don't think we need to have an initialize going on. We're not calling it anywhere or using it. Okay, so sort data. Now I need to actually sort the data. As they click it, we're going to have to track if they should be doing descending or ascending or default, which is going to be 3 states. So in order to track those 3 states, I need to say, let me think here. First of all, I need to, let's default it. So here on initialization of the fruit service, I'm going to say, I'm going to set an object called sorted to 0. And I've decided I'm going to make it so that 0 just means it's unsorted, just came straight from the database, whereas 1 is going to be sorted ascending, and -1 will be sorted descending. As just after a little bit of deliberation, I thought that was a pretty good way to do it. So we've got sorted here. I'm going to say, instead of just console logging something, I'm going to say, let's get what the current state is. Get object sorted. All right, and I'm going to say, if they click it and it's 0, if it's -1, it should go to 0. If it's 0, it should go to 1. If it's 1, it should flip back around to -1. And there's -1 is 0. So it should just really do +1 each time. So I'm going to say if sorted equals if sorted equals 1, then flip it around to -1. Otherwise, just increment. So sorted plus 1, something like that. All right, so we've got sorted equals sorted plus 1, and then I'm going to go ahead and set it back inside of the session as having been altered. So now that we have whatever the current one is, so it started off as 0, so the first time they click on it, it's going to come in here, it's going to increment it to 1. So now I need to say sorted data equals function. I'm going to have to be returning back this sorted data to here. So I'm going to say fill table and with this sorted data. Oh, this doesn't even take a parameter at the moment. So I'm going to say here fill table with what. I like that phrasing. So the with what is going to be the what they're going to use. So instead of saying here use get fruits, I will down here say use get fruits. So fill table, the initial time it comes through, it will pass in just the default data, the with what, and it will use that to fill the table. But after that, whenever they click sort on the click, it will give back some sort of sorted data from right here. So that sorted data will come in here, sorted, and I will need to say I'm going to be returning a brand new object. I don't want to sort the actual data that's in memory. I want to sort of keep that in memory. I don't want to sort it in place. So I'm going to say var sorted data equals a new array. Var starting data equals get fruits. I'm just going to call this to get the unsorted base data. Let's go ahead and do that first. We got the sorted data. We're making sure that we're sorted appropriately. Let's call this raw data. And I will say if sorted is 0, which means that should just come back raw, then I'm going to say sorted data equals raw data. Yeah, it works for me. Actually, let's just say return raw data. Yeah, I wouldn't even need to store this right here. Return that raw data automatically. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so since that's a return, I actually don't need. It's sort of an early return, so I don't need an else statement. So I'm going to say. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to fill in that raw. Okay, I still need to make a raw data. Var. I'm going to sorted data objects. Sorted data equals bam. I'm going to say $.each for each thing inside raw data. I'm going to do a function of ix. This is an each function. I'm just going to fill in that sorted data with the raw data, and then I'll sort that in place. So sorted data dot push the object. Just make sure I'm still at least building and not getting any errors at this point. Okay, so I've got sorted data filled in. Now I can sort that in place. So I'm going to say sorted data dot sort. So there's going to be a first object and a second object to sort. And so the sort function, if you don't know, you want to return an integer that says should this be a higher or a lower precedence based on whatever the functionality of the A and the B is. So for example, if I return a 1 for one of them and a -1 for another one, it'll then sort. It's really sorting by the integer. So I'm going to say sort val. I'm going to start with 1. But I'm going to say if, I'm not there yet. If a dot value, so remember these objects, each of these objects have a key and a value. So I'm going to say if a.value is less than b.value, then sort val equals -1, return sort val. I think that's pretty much it. And then I need to return sorted data instead. So let me do this, bam. Look at that. So I click sort, 1029, okay, 1029. That didn't. 9, 20, 10, 10, 29. It's definitely doing some sort of sorting dynamically. So that's really cool. It's not fully finished yet. So I'm going to say instead, ooh, I know why. I know why it didn't look quite right. Because when I say sort, this doesn't look like it's in order numerically, but it is in order if these are strings, which they are. If you can see over here, they're strings. So 1, 2, 9, that is in order, but that's not good. We want to treat these as numeric. And actually, when we sort the data by clicking one of these other ones, over here we want to sort these by string, but over here we want to sort these by numeric. So the sorting logic here is going to be slightly different for this side than it is for this side. But I think we can reuse this function. So I'm going to reuse this function. I'm going to say this field is less than this field, but I need to know how to evaluate this field. Do I evaluate it as a number? Do I evaluate it as a string? Do I just leave it alone? Whatever. So I'm going to pass in a function. This is going to be a function. I'm going to say if get field A, get a field from A, is less than get a field from B, bam, then it'll go ahead and do the sorting. But now whoever calls this needs to say, you're sorting the data, but I need to tell you how to do this. So each one of these that calls it is going to tell it separately how it's going to evaluate the field, which means we're going to go over here. And so these two, we need to pass in how to evaluate that field. So for here, we're going to pass in a function that's going to say, this is for sort by name, so I'm going to say x.key. And that's just a string, so I'm just going to keep that as x.key. But this is sorting by the value, but the value is supposed to be an integer, so I'm going to say parse int like that. Let's just see how that works. Okay, there's no errors. 9, 10, 20. 9, 20, 10. Okay, let's refresh. So this is 0. If I click this, it should be ascending. 9, 10, 20. If I click again, it should be descending. Okay, the descending isn't working. Ah, I know why descending isn't working. We're getting sorted, and if it's 0, then it returns raw data. But we're not using it again down here of whether or not it's if it should be flipped or not, if it should be ascending or descending. We are getting the order of the sorted data, but in order to flip it, it's going to be really easy because descending would be sorted would be -1 in that case, or it'll be 1 whenever it's ascending. So whenever it's descending, -1, it'll just invert the value of sort val to be the opposite. So let's do that. Let's hit refresh. It's ascending, it's descending, that's normal. So for this one, that is ascending, descending, normal. Flawless victory. Let's go ahead and do this. I keep doing that. Habit. Finish sort functionality. All right. Let me just make sure. Okay, implement a dynamic table that can list any number of fruits. That is dynamic. It's mocked out data, but it is dynamic. And there should be a column with the name of the fruit and a column with how many calories there are per serving. Each of those columns should be sortable with a 3-way sort, ascending, descending, and default. And, I mean, I think we've accomplished this with jQuery and JavaScript. And I'm going to look over in the chat, see if there's any questions or anything like that. It doesn't look like it. I actually have a, speaking of all the Git stuff that I've been doing, I have a repo that I've already made so that you guys can look through these commits and check them out yourself. Anyone interested in this video can go see the order of the stuff. So what you have to do is, since I only did a git init to start this up, it's only a local repository. What I need to do is add a remote. And I've actually created this DWID fruit on the Jinn Studios GitHub. And I'm going to say git push. I have to set the upstream to begin with, but from now on I should be able to just push instead of having to set upstream every time. So I'm going to push to master. All right, cool. And I should be able to just git push from now on, except there's nothing to push. It's all up to date, so it doesn't really matter. All right, so I've got the Git repo up there. I've followed some continuous development and some really good principles here. I've separated my files into a controller, which is the stuff that messes with the DOM, a backend service that has the logical stuff, possibly hitting HTTP stuff, the index.html, which has the DOM and the styles and everything like that. And I think this looks really good. All right, so I'm going to sign off, and I hope you guys like this, and I hope you guys also contribute if you can do a React version or do an Angular version. Do something that follows best practices and principles. Don't just do it and get it done. Like, I could have done this all in the same file. I could have made it a global scope. I could have gotten this done, but not even used Git. But I was following some best practices that I could, trying to introduce some things to some people who didn't know about them, and hopefully you guys can do this and even improve on my methods. Surely by a lot more, since I'm not natively a JavaScript developer. But next time we're going to go into some C#, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.